Welcome to Whispers of History, where myths unravel slowly, facts drift like fog, and sleep tiptoes in with every story. Tonight's tale comes not with epic battles or thunder-wielding gods, but with a nymph who fell in love with herself and made a bit of a mess out of it. This is the story of Echo, the jealous reflection, and a few immortal side characters who really needed therapy. But don't worry, you probably won't make it through this day. So go ahead, like, subscribe, and let us know your location and local time in the comments. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You open your eyes to a forest that hums, but very politely. The air is gentle here, sweet with resin and something slightly floral, possibly nymph shampoo. The canopy overhead flickers with late sunlight, and the ground beneath you is mossy, forgiving, like it knows you didn't ask to be part of a myth today. You walk slowly, not because you're afraid, but because this story doesn't rush. You step over a root shaped like a question mark and duck under a branch heavy with tiny white blossoms. A bird calls out once lazily. Then silence again, except for a brook gurgling somewhere nearby, like it's telling secrets it'll immediately forget. This is Mount Helicon, or it's supposed to be. Scholars aren't entirely sure which modern hill corresponds to it, but let's pretend it's this one because it's quieter here. The kind of place no one bothers you unless they're immortal, and even then only if they're bored. You pass a stone covered in lichen and poetry. Someone's carved verses into it, probably a god with too much time and a chisel. You run your fingers over the grooves. The letters spell out, "Let none be more beautiful than truth," which is ironic because beauty tends to cause a lot of trouble around here. Speaking of which, that rustling behind you, that's her. Echo. She doesn't appear all at once. She's sound before she's sight, a laugh but not quite, a flutter in the air like someone exhaling joy and insecurity at the same time. You turn your head, but of course there's no one there. Echo is a nymph cursed to repeat others, never led, and she's been trailing you for a while, not because you're interesting, no offense, but because that's what she does. She follows, she listens, she copies. And today, poor thing is in love, again. Echo, daughter of the earth and air, probably servant of the goddess Hera, until she got fired dramatically, is a master of tragic timing. She once distracted Hera with small talk so Zeus could sneak off and philander in peace, which for some reason Hera didn't appreciate. Echo was cursed to lose her voice, not completely, just the part that starts things. Now she can only speak when spoken to, a social nightmare. Right now, she's watching someone across a sunlit glade. You step quietly, careful not to break a twig, because this is getting good. There, kneeling by a pool, is Narcissus. You've heard of him, the original influencer. Cheekbones so sharp they've got their own myth. A hunter, technically, but mostly he hunts glances, especially his own. He's leaning toward the water, face barely inches from the surface, completely entranced by what he sees. Echo is entranced too, but not with the water. She's watching him watch himself. And somehow, heartbreak is already in the air. We'll get to the part where everything unravels. But for now, the sun dips low, the forest hushes further, and you find a flat rock to sit on. There's a beetle climbing your shoe, you let it. Major historical fact. The myth of Echo and Narcissus is first fully told in Ovid's Metamorphoses, written around 8 CE, a Roman work that preserved countless Greek myths in Latin poetic form. Weird cultural tidbit. In some rural Greek regions, Echoing cliffs were once believed to be haunted by disembodied nymphs who could curse you if you mocked their repeating voices. So maybe don't yell at canyons. The scholarly uncertainty. Historians still debate whether Echo was a minor myth added later to enhance the Narcissus story, or whether she originated independently in earlier oral traditions. You lean back on the rock, feeling the heat of the day slowly leave its surface. The forest holds still like it's watching the same scene you are. Narcissus hasn't moved, neither has Echo, and honestly, you're not sure who's more spellbound. As Echo edges forward, cautious as moonlight, she doesn't want to scare him. She doesn't want to ruin the moment. She just wants to be close enough to say something when he finally says something she can repeat. That's how she has to flirt now, like a living voice memo. He shifts slightly, murmurs to the water, "You're beautiful." As Echo lights up like a lantern at a dinner party, she steps forward. "Oh, you're beautiful," she echoes softly. Oh, he frowns, "Who's there?" Who's there?" she says back, hopeful, like maybe this is the start of something. Narcissus blinks, looking around. "Stop that." Echo, "Stop that. It's not going well." You sigh, Echo sighs. Narcissus stares suspiciously at the trees. At this point in the myth, you want to intervene. Pull Echo aside. Tell her, "Listen, sweetie, maybe someone who talks to their own reflection isn't boyfriend material." But you can't, you're just the observer, like a museum ghost. You hear the stream again, it sounds smug. Now here's the thing, Narcissus was cursed too. That whole scene at the pool isn't just vanity, it's punishment. One version says he rejected too many lovers. Another says he made fun of someone with a limp. Either way, a goddess got mad. Probably Nemesis, who specialized in what we'd now call instant karma. So now, Narcissus is doomed to fall for something he can never reach. His own face, which, if you think about it, is peak poetic justice. As Echo creeps closer again, she's desperate now. She repeats his words, tries to match his tone, his sadness, his awe, but all he hears is mockery or worse, interruption. Eventually, he snaps, storming away from the pool. And Echo, she doesn't follow this time. She turns back to the clearing, crumples against a tree trunk, and becomes very, very quiet. Like she's learning the taste of loneliness. You lie down on the moss beside her, figuratively, of course. Because this is her moment of silence. Some say Echo faded into nothing, that only her voice remained, floating around cliffs and caverns. Others believe she was taken back by the earth, pulled into the roots and stones where she still listens. Meanwhile, Narcissus returns to the pool. Over and over, he can't stop looking. He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, just gazes, admires, pities, longs, possibly adjusts his angle for better lighting. Eventually, he turns into a flower. A Narcissus, naturally. You pluck one beside you, pale, delicate, just a little sad. You stare at it for a while. Not because you're vain, but because it's peaceful. Major historical fact. The Narcissus flower, often linked to daffodils, became a classical symbol of self-love and tragic beauty, appearing in Roman art and poetry as a metaphor for destructive introspection. Weird cultural tidbit. In Victorian, the language of flowers, gifting a Narcissus symbolized unrequited love, or in some cases, just a gentle insult. The scholarly uncertainty. Some mythographers believe the tale of Narcissus originally had no flower at all, and that the plant association was added much later to suit Roman aesthetics. You stay by the pool for a while. The light has turned that late honey color that makes everything look like a painting in a very sleepy museum. Narcissus hasn't moved except to tilt his head, an angle change so subtle it would make a statue jealous. He's not admiring anymore, he's aching. He whispers to his reflection, not realizing or maybe not caring that it's not a person, that it's just light and water playing tricks. A trick that works too well because he falls for it completely. A face that listens. A gaze that never turns away. Perfection without personality. Honestly, a terrible conversationalist. You hear a faint rustle from the trees behind you. Echo again, she's not gone, not really. She lingers like memory, like the song that gets stuck in your head but you never learn the words to. She watches him from a distance now. She doesn't speak. She can't, not unless he starts. But you can feel her ache from here. You decide to walk, just a little, stretch your legs. The path coils through ferns and low shrubs, dipping in and out of sunspots. A bee lumbers past your ear, slow and aimless, like it's forgotten where it was going mid-flight. Same, honestly. Eventually, you come to a clearing where the ground is soft with pine needles, and an odd stone structure stands crooked in the middle. It looks like a shrine or a mailbox designed by someone who only vaguely understood the assignment. On closer inspection, it's a dedication. The inscription is in ancient Greek but very sloppily carved, like someone tried to write it in a hurry or while drunk. It reads, "Here lies he who loved none but his own face." A romantic epitaph if you're into tragic irony. This is where Narcissus, they say, finally became still, where he melted into myth. Some say he turned into a flower on the spot. Others say he wasted away, and the gods, out of pity or poetic flair, transformed what was left. Either way, what remains is the flower. Fragile, perfect, head bowed toward water as if still looking. You lie down beside it. The earth smells like damp bark and old stories. The kind that don't ask to be remembered but insist anyway. In the distance, you hear echo. Not words, just the ghost of sound, a mimic of a sigh, a half-laugh stolen from someone else's memory. She's still here, or something of her is. You think about how her curse wasn't just speech. It was erasure, to be near people but never part of them, to repeat but never start, a background track to someone else's story. You think about how that sounds familiar. The air cools, the leaves rustle with secrets, and you begin to wonder if all myths are just very old metaphors for feelings we still haven't figured out. Major historical fact: Narcissus's story became a cornerstone in early psychological theory, coined narcissism to describe self-obsession and withdrawal from external reality, using the myth as his model. Weird cultural tidbit. Some ancient Roman gardens included pools designed specifically to reflect flowers planted beside them, creating a literal Narcissus effect that guests found both poetic and slightly eerie. The scholarly uncertainty. There's ongoing debate over whether Echo and Narcissus were originally two separate myths that were merged by Roman authors for dramatic effect. It's darker now, but not quite night. The forest glows with that silver light that makes everything look softer and slightly unreal. You wander back toward the pool. Narcissus is still there. In the myth, he never leaves. In this version, maybe he blinks once. You crouch beside him, peering into the water. His reflection is flawless, of course. So is yours, in a more lopsided, sleep-deprived kind of way. The ripples distort it just enough to make you question which version is truer, the one you see or the one others do. Or the one echo might echo back if she still could. You hear her footsteps soft like regret. She approaches again, tentative, like someone checking if it's okay to care. She's not here to chase him anymore. She's here because, well, habits die harder than hearts. She sits beside a rock and watches the water, not him. There's nothing left for her in his eyes. No possibility, just the echo of what could been. The breeze picks up. Pine branches whisper against one another like old friends telling secrets behind cupped leaves. You lie back again, hands behind your head. Stars begin to show up slowly, like guests arriving to a party that already ended. Now let's take a moment to step sideways in time. Far from this glade, in a polished villa in Roman Italy, a young noble is reciting this very story aloud. He's reading Ovid, dramatic and slightly theatrical, while his sisters embroider mildly judgmental-looking owls into cushion covers. They don't say anything, but their eyebrows say plenty. "I don't get it," the youngest says. "Why didn't Echo just write a note?" The oldest sighs the way only older siblings can. "Because," she says, "some curses are meant to be metaphorical." And honestly, she's right. Back in the forest, Echo rises slowly. She walks away, not vanishing, just leaving, fading into branches. Her footsteps become the breeze, her breath becomes the silence between crickets. And her voice, well, you'll still hear it, especially when you least expect it. Especially when you say something you wish you hadn't and it bounces back at you in someone else's voice. You close your eyes. You feel the moss cradle your head like a very judgmental pillow. You feel the hum of the forest like a lullaby played on wind and distance. You wonder why we tell stories like this, why we make beauty sad and sadness beautiful. And then you realize it's because that's the only way we can forgive ourselves for having both. Sleep tugs at you now, you let it, you drift not away but inward, toward dreams that echo. And somewhere maybe a nymph smiles. Major historical fact. Metamorphoses was considered so influential that, during the Middle Ages, it was used in Christian schools as a key source of classical knowledge, even though it's filled with pagan myths and romantic disasters. Weird cultural tidbit. The flower of Narcissus was once believed to ward off evil spirits. People wore dried petals in pouches, unaware they were basically carrying tiny poetic tragedies around their necks. The scholarly uncertainty. There is still no consensus on whether Narcissus's pool was meant to represent literal water or metaphorical self-delusion, a mirror for the ego or a commentary on perception itself. It's full night now, but not a scary kind. The kind of night that hushes you without asking. The moon is a pale, watchful eye above the treetops, and the stars hang like silent punctuation in a sentence the universe is still writing. You feel safe here, not because nothing bad can happen, but because nothing is in a hurry to. Even time seems to tiptoe. You stretch out on the moss, one arm behind your head, and think of Echo, not the girl, but the phenomenon. The way sound bounces. The way a word can leave your lips, vanish into air, and then unexpectedly come back. Slightly distorted, a little late, a little haunting. You say your own name out loud. And sure enough, the trees whisper it back. That's the thing about Echo. Her story didn't end, it just changed form. Some say she became the very idea of repetition, that her soul dissolved into physics, that her heartbreak still loops in every canyon, every mountain pass, every empty theater. You might not see her anymore, but when your voice comes back to you a second time, that's her. You imagine her now walking somewhere else, through a marble hallway maybe, or across a forgotten coastline, touching each stone, each wave, each crack in the wall. She's collecting fragments, not just of herself, but of everyone, like a keeper of moments. The ones people didn't mean to say aloud. While you sigh, somewhere she sighs too. Meanwhile, the story shifts, like a boat unmooring itself from a sleepy dock. Because Narcissus isn't the only one cursed in this mythic little ecosystem. The gods, as usual, have been busy, not with creation or mercy or anything productive, but with vengeance, mood swings, and overcomplicated love triangles. Divine priorities. Pan, for instance, is around here somewhere. Yes, that Pan, the satyr god with goat legs and flirty chaos energy. He once fell for Echo too because of course he did. Everyone did before the curse, but she wasn't interested. She didn't say no, she couldn't technically, but she didn't say yes either. So he took it personally in the way insecure immortals tend to do. One legend says he incited shepherds to tear her apart, but don't worry, it's not that kind of story. Ovid softened it, said her body dissolved, her voice remained. A poetic way of saying she became her essence. You close your eyes, you try to imagine what that feels like. To lose everything except the part of yourself that reflects others. To be a mirror that only works if someone else looks first. It's a feeling you might recognize. Major historical fact. Echo's transformation into just a voice reflects a recurring theme in Greco-Roman myths where nymphs symbolize aspects of nature, becoming trees, streams, breezes, or sounds, often after tragedy. Weird cultural tidbit. In ancient Roman theater, echoes were sometimes replicated by hidden chorus members backstage to add a mystical effect. Early surround sound powered by awkward teenagers in tunics. The scholarly uncertainty. Some scholars argue that Echo's curse wasn't originally Hera's doing, but a later narrative invention to connect her to more well-known gods. Earlier myths may have had her as an independent forest spirit. You wander further from the pool, deeper into the woods. The path is no longer visible, not because it's gone, but because the forest has stopped pretending to be polite. It's thick with shadow and memory, but you're not scared, you're part of the story now. As around you, trees lean like gossiping old women. One drops a leaf into your hair, you thank it even though it doesn't answer. You imagine it would if Echo were still nearby. She'd repeat your thank you. She'd whisper it twice just to make sure the forest heard. Ahead, a flicker of movement. Not human, not divine, something in between. You come upon a glade bathed in moonlight, where an ancient amphora lies half buried in soil, its painted surface worn and flaking. It tells a version of the myth. You run your fingers over it, tracing the faded lines. A girl among trees, a boy staring at his own reflection, and a flower blooming between them. On the back of the vase, a newer etching, likely added centuries later when someone else stumbled upon it and couldn't help but leave their mark. It says in badly scratched Greek, "You love what you cannot hold. Welcome to being alive." You sit beside the amphora for a while. The crickets have a rhythm now like a slow drum beat. Somewhere a night bird calls, then waits, then calls again. It's as if it's trying to find itself in the echo. You wonder if that's what Echo did too, sought pieces of herself in the words of others. Maybe that's what we all do. Maybe we're all just stitched together by the phrases that stick. A compliment we never forgot. A goodbye we weren't ready for. the sound of someone calling our name across a field once. You lie back. Above you, the stars wheel slowly, patiently. You think about Narcissus again, not just as a man, but as a metaphor. A boy so focused on his own reflection, he missed the world reflecting him back. Missed echo, missed kindness, missed warning signs. You think about the times you've done that. It's okay, we all do. Sometimes we get stuck looking inward. Sometimes we forget the voice that answers back matters more than the one that speaks first. The wind rustles the trees gently, and somewhere a whisper. It matters more. You smile. I still hear echo, still listening. Major historical fact. Echo's myth was often used in philosophical texts as a symbol of passive identity, someone defined by others, a concept debated heavily in Roman Stoic and later Christian writings. Weird cultural tidbit. Some medieval monks believed that echoing sounds were voices of spirits or angels responding in coded language. Certain cathedrals were built to intentionally echo prayers back to. The scholarly uncertainty. There is disagreement over whether Echo was originally a single mythic figure or an anthropomorphic stand-in for many echoing nymphs across different regions of Greece. You don't walk so much as drift now. The forest is thick but gentle, like an old wool blanket that itches slightly but smells like your childhood home. Trees narrow the sky above, branches weaving like gossip over your head, rustling in slow conversation with the wind. The path, if it ever existed, is gone, but you don't mind. You're not here to arrive anywhere, you're just here. You start noticing things that don't belong in myths. A broken sandal strap hanging from a branch, a glint of copper, maybe a forgotten mirror or a piece of armor too vain to decay. You pass a grove where everything smells faintly of lavender and something sharper like citrus, even though there are no such trees in sight. The moon overhead has shifted slightly closer now maybe, or just watching harder. And then you see her again. Echo. But not as before. Not the nymph creeping through branches, not the voice in the rocks. This time she's sitting, just sitting, on a large, flat stone like it's a throne made for someone who never got to rule anything. Her posture is calm, not sad, just still. She looks at you, and for a moment you expect her to speak. But she doesn't. Instead, she listens. It's a silence that invites, not excludes. One that says you can rest here too. So you sit, the stone is cool beneath you. Your limbs feel heavy not from effort but from release. The kind of heaviness that comes when you finally stop holding yourself up for other people. You listen with her. The forest, the air, the night, they all keep making their small, soft noises. A branch creaks far above. A nightjar murmurs in its sleep. Somewhere water trickles over stones. Everything sounds slightly distant, like you're underwater or under a spell. Maybe both. And then quietly, Echo moves her hand. Not toward you, just across her own lap, trailing fingers over stone. Like she's drawing something invisible or tracing a memory she no longer owns. You realize something. Maybe she never wanted Narcissus. Not really. Maybe what she wanted was to be heard first. To be the start of a story instead of its shadow. To speak a word no one had ever said before and have it echo outward from her. But that was never her curse. Her curse was to be second. To be the reply, not the statement. The reflection, not the face. The quiet after someone else's noise. And somehow she made it beautiful. You close your eyes beside her. Well, the forest breathes. The stone warms slightly beneath you, as if it remembers how many people sat here before, hopping to feel seen. You think about how many people become echoes without ever knowing. How many live in repetition, not by choice, but because they were never handed the first word. Maybe tonight you hear her clearly for the first time. Maybe this is the first word. Major historical fact. In ancient Greek mystery cults, particularly those honoring Orpheus and Dionysus, echoes were considered signs of divine presence, used as omens or messages from the underworld during nighttime rituals. Weird cultural tidbit. The philosopher Pythagoras reportedly believed echoes were caused by the soul rebounding through the air, an invisible imprint of your inner self returning to you as sound. The scholarly uncertainty. Some classical texts reference multiple nymphs named Echo, suggesting that the myth may have been a composite tale. Several stories folded into one by Roman poets seeking narrative unity. Eventually, you rise from the stone, not because you're ready, but because stories like sleep need movement before they settle. Echo doesn't follow. She remains on her throne of silence, hands folded now, watching the woods as though they might answer a question she hasn't asked yet. You offer her a nod, small, not performative. The kind of nod people give statues when they want to say thank you without getting caught talking to rocks. You leave the grove and the forest shifts around you. It always does. You walk now through a stretch of trees with white bark like bone, or their trunks are narrow and straight, evenly spaced like the columns of a forgotten temple. The ground here is softer, blanketed in old pine needles and feathers. The air smells of salt, though the sea is nowhere near. And suddenly, laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, just unexpected. You turn and find yourself in a strange little clearing where a group of nymphs dances in slow, spiraling patterns. Not the glamorous kind, either. These are the slightly disheveled, chaotic ones. Their hair is tangled with twigs, their robes mismatched, their feet bare and smudged with soil. But their movements are perfect, like wind playing with fabric. They don't see you, or maybe they do and simply don't care. One nymph twirls and sings a wordless melody, which the others echo, not as exact mimicry, but as harmony. Layers, variations, little riffs on the same theme. This, you realize, is where Echo would have danced once. Before Hera, before heartbreak, before she became a myth inside a metaphor inside a bedtime story. You feel the tug of longing, not your own, but the story. It wants her back here, it misses her, like a song without its bridge, a joke without its setup, a breath without its sigh. One of the nymphs spins too fast and falls. The others laugh, help her up, and spin again. Imperfection is part of the pattern. That's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it real. You stay a moment longer, then move on. As you walk, the landscape shifts again. You find yourself passing beneath stone arches carved with ivy and strange symbols, likely left by mortals who thought this place needed marking, as if the gods might forget it existed. One arch has a small bench under it and a clay jug of water someone's left behind. You drink. It tastes slightly of time and rain. You sit on the bench and think about reflections. Not just in water, but in people. How often have you looked at someone and only seen yourself? Or wanted someone to reflect back your worth, your charm, your pain, just so you could believe it was there? Narcissus didn't die because he was beautiful. Well, he died because he mistook his reflection for connection. Xanda Echo. She suffered because she thought repeating someone meant being close to them. But neither was true. And yet, don't we all fall into those traps sometimes? The forest rustles agreement. You close your eyes, let your shoulders fall. It's so easy to rest now. Your breath slows to match the hush of the world. Even the wind moves more gently here, as if it too is tiptoeing into sleep. You open your eyes one last time. And in the distance, just barely, you hear echo. But not your voice. This time it's hers. Just one word, clear, soft. Stay. And for now, you do. Major historical fact. The myth of Echo and Narcissus was rediscovered during the Renaissance and inspired countless paintings, poems, and operas. Each retelling shaped by its era's obsession with love, loss, and identity. Weird cultural tidbit. In early psychoacoustics experiments in the 1800s, scientists tried to measure the emotional quality of an echo by yelling different phrases into caves and gauging listener reactions. A process that was, unsurprisingly, wildly subjective. The scholarly uncertainty. Some linguists believe that the very word echo may not have originated from the myth, but that the myth was created to explain the already existing word. A classic case of myth filling in the blanks of etymology. The bench is warm beneath you now, gently holding your weight the way memories sometimes do quietly without resistance. You tilt your head back and trace the branches overhead. They're tangled like old handwriting. Letters written too quickly, left unmailed. Sentences that never quite ended. Above them, the stars have rearranged themselves again. Still the same stars, but not quite. They always look different when you're listening instead of looking. You think of echo again. Still here somewhere. Not in body, but in space, in sound, in that strange, fragile layer between noise and meaning, between the words we say and the ones we hope someone hears. The wind rustles, and for a moment you swear it carries her voice again, not repeating you this time, not reflecting anyone, just speaking. The one word. A before. And now you wonder. A before what? Before the curse, before Narcissus, before even the gods started meddling in mortal silence. You rise from the bench. Your steps take you downhill toward a grove where the air feels cooler, like walking into a cathedral made of leaves. You pass an old olive tree, its bark twisted like a thinking face. It's seen things, maybe even echo, maybe even the first person who ever shouted into a canyon and thought the rocks were talking back. At the grove's center, there's a pool. Not Narcissus's pool. Another one's. This one doesn't reflect, not clearly anyway. The surface moves too much, tiny insects skating across it, ripples from leaves dropping in. If you try to see yourself, the image stutters. You appear in fragments, nose, then cheek, then a blur. You sit by it anyway. There's a peace in not seeing clearly, in letting the self go a little soft around the edges, in not being a mirror, just a presence. You think about Narcissus again, and how maybe he didn't fall in love with himself at all. Maybe he fell in love with the idea of being seen. Maybe what he really wanted was what Echo wanted, to be noticed, to be loved, to feel real in someone else's eyes. But instead, they circled each other like shadows, each reflecting, never reaching. Echo could only speak what he spoke. Narcissus could only look where he saw beauty. Neither could step outside themselves long enough to meet the other. You reach into the pool and touch the water. It's cold, but it doesn't pull you in. It just moves gently around your fingers, as if accepting your presence. It's as if saying, you don't need to be perfect here. You don't need to reflect anything back. I'll just stay. I'll just exist. As and you do. Major historical fact. In the Metamorphoses, Ovid ends Narcissus's story with woodland nymphs mourning him and finding only a flower where his body lay, cementing the myth's role as both a tragedy and a transformation. Weird cultural tidbit. In certain rural parts of ancient Greece, lovers would toss stones into still pools and whisper their beloved's name, hopping for an echo as a sign that the feeling was returned. A scholarly uncertainty. Some ancient texts reference Narcissus having a twin sister whose death led to his obsession with his reflection. This version complicates the idea of simple vanity, suggesting grief instead. The forest hums now. Not with noise exactly, with presence, like everything around you has agreed to breathe at the same time. The trees, the stones, the water, even your heartbeat has joined the rhythm. Slow, soft, certain. You lie down on the mossy bank beside the pool. The earth gives a little like it's tired too. Above you, clouds slide across the moon in long, lazy drifts, shapes with no agenda. No one's in a rush here. All you hear her again. I'll echo. Get closer now. But not mimicking. Not hiding. This time she hums. Just a melody, wordless, not sad. Almost circular, like a lullaby looping back to its first note before you even realize the verse has ended. And in that sound, you feel everything she is. Not just the nymph, but the idea, the longing, the patience. The ache of repeating someone else's words in the hope they might someday hear their own meaning more clearly. You think of every time you've answered someone with a phrase you didn't choose. Every time you nodded instead of speaking. Every time you said me too instead of this is how I feel. You think of how many times we become echoes, without curses, without gods, just because we're trying to be understood. As echo hums again. Again the sound is softer now. Not fatting, just resting. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your eyelids, the pool still ripples. The trees still lean. A small breeze slides past your cheek like a friendly ghost. Then the scene shifts again. You dream not of Narcissus, not of gods, not even of Echo, but of a quiet hill covered in flowers. Dozens of them, all Narcissus blooms, their pale yellow petals glowing faintly in moonlight. They don't reflect. They just stand. They're simple. They're still. All together. You walk among them in the dream. You don't pick them. You just exist with them. And in that moment, no one asks you to echo. No one asks you to reflect. No one needs you to say anything at all. You are just you. And for Echo, somewhere in the woods, that is enough. Major historical fact. By the late Middle Ages, the myth of Echo was interpreted allegorically in religious texts, seen as a symbol for those who repeat scripture without understanding or souls trapped in earthly desires. Weird cultural tidbit. Ancient Greek actors playing Echo in early tragedies would use masks with built-in resonators to amplify their voices, creating haunting effects that audiences believed were supernatural. The scholarly uncertainty. It's still debated whether Narcissus truly died in the myth or was simply transformed into the flower. Ovid's Latin is poetic enough to leave both interpretations open. You are lying still, but the world keeps moving gently, as if rocking you to sleep without asking first. The pool beside you stirs. A breeze runs fingers through the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls out once, then stops mid-note like it's changed its mind or forgotten the melody. You open your eyes, not because you want to, but because something has shifted. It's not louder. It's just a clearer. You're in the same forest, but it feels older now, more ancient. As though time itself has gone back a few centuries to put on something more appropriate. The trees are taller. The shadows stretch further. The air tastes like olive oil and firewood and half-finished stories. While you sit up, the pool beside you is gone. In its place, a dry hollow with pebbles and curled leaves. Whatever water was there has slipped away while you dreamed. But you don't feel loss, just transition. Echo's story has always been about what's left behind. She is what remains after the voices fade, the imprint, the memory, the breath that lingers in the air when the words are over. You begin walking again. Your feet crunch gently over pine needles and soil. There's no path, not really, but you seem to know where to go, not in a grand, heroic way, more like the way your hand knows how to find a light switch in the dark. It's muscle memory, story memory, myth memory. Eventually, you arrive at a place that looks like the remains of a small temple, or a shrine, or a very elaborate picnic spot for gods with dramatic taste. There's a stone pedestal at its center. Upon it, a single object. Not a scroll. Not a flower. The lyres. Old cracked strings missing, but still beautiful in that ruined, gentle way that only forgotten things can be. You run your fingers across its surface. It doesn't play, but it hums, faintly, like it remembers songs even if it can't perform them anymore. You realize this might belong to Echo. Not because she played it, but because someone might left it behind for her, or because she deserved to have a voice in wood and string, if not in air. And now you wonder, what would Echo have sung if she could? If she could started the song instead of finishing someone else? Would she sing about love? Or about the pain of watching someone love something unreachable? Would she sing about silence? Or the burden of being mistaken for it? You sit on the broken steps of the shrine, close your eyes again. This time when you hear a voice, it's not yours. Not Narcissus. It's hers. And she sings. So softly, not in words, not in echo, but in feeling. It's the sound of a person returning to themselves. And you, in stillness, begin to do the same. Major historical fact. Lyres, often associated with Apollo and Orpheus, were also sacred to nymphs and muses. Many woodland shrines included them as offerings to spirits of music, poetry, and voice. Weird cultural tidbit. Ancient Greeks believed some sounds, like certain scales or tones, could affect the soul directly. Echoes were sometimes classified as liminal sounds, neither human nor divine, but something in between. The scholarly uncertainty. While Echo is often portrayed as a passive victim, some ancient interpretations saw her as a protective forest spirit who chose silence over deception, a rare act of defiance in a world ruled by gods. Still on the shrine steps, you begin to feel the weight of stillness settle over you, not like a burden, but like a blanket laid with care. The stars above you blink slowly as if they too are growing drowsy. The night doesn't press in, it unfolds outward into something larger than sleep. You wonder what happens to myths that don't end. As Echo never really did. Narcissus had an exit, a flower, a memorial, a tragic finish wrapped up in poetry and pity, but Echo, she was left behind. Not as a warning, not as a symbol, as a presence, a kind of soft truth. You step into the ruins again, feeling the way the earth dips beneath you like it remembers every footstep taken across it. There are carvings on the stones, names long erased, prayers once whispered. A poem etched into the far wall catches your eye. The words are worn but readable. Let me not be remembered as the one who chased, but as the one who remained when all others were done singing. You run your fingers across it. It feels like her. There are stories you recall where Echo becomes something more. In one late version, she outlasts not just Narcissus but entire centuries, listening, adapting, echoing not just people but the land itself. Becoming a guide almost, not a tragic nymph but a guardian of forgotten words. And maybe that's what this forest is. A place where the echoes live after the sound has gone. The quiet archives. A sanctuary of second chances. You walk to the edge of the clearing and find a tree stump carved into a chair. It invites you to sit, not because it needs you, but because it's learned the beauty of being still when someone else arrives. So you said, the forest listens. You listen back. And in that silence, something begins to change. You stop needing the story to move forward. You stop needing a resolution. You start to understand that some myths don't teach you anything new, they just remind you of something you already knew but forgot. Like how to be quiet without vanishing. How to echo someone's voice and still remain yourself. An echo's voice, when it comes again, is soft. So soft, you almost don't notice it's not repeating anything. It just says, you're here. And that's enough. Major historical fact. In late Roman mythology, Echo was sometimes merged with the figure of Aura, a personification of the breeze, symbolizing the evolution of her myth into a broader metaphor for presence without form. Weird cultural tidbit. In ancient amphitheaters, architects designed acoustics so well that even faint echoes from the back rows could reach the stage, reminding performers they were always being heard, even when unseen. The scholarly uncertainty. There's debate over whether echo, curse, was meant as a literal punishment or a narrative device invented to explain the natural phenomenon of sound repetition, turning physics into poetry. You stay in the chair carved from the stump for a long time, long enough for the night to thicken, for the forest to curl around itself like a sleeping cat. The air hums with the breath of trees. You don't move, you don't speak, you don't need to. And the world, in its infinite hush, rewards your silence with a gift. A memory, not your own. An echo. The forest opens inward, and suddenly you are inside a different time. The leaves shimmer with a slightly different green. The shadows stretch in unfamiliar ways, and before you, just a few paces ahead, there she is. An echo, a whole, uncursed, unbroken. She laughs. It's a good laugh, rich and round, like honey poured into warm tea. Her hair is wild, her robe untied at the sleeves, her bare feet dirty from dancing too far into the woods. She's teasing someone, maybe a friend, maybe a dryad, maybe a satyr who told a joke too badly and is now pretending he meant to fail. Oh, she isn't trying to be beautiful, she isn't trying to be heard, she just is. And for a moment, you realize something. Before the curse, Echo wasn't merely a passive creature waiting to mirror others. She chose when to speak. She chose how to respond. She was clever, curious, occasionally wickedly sarcastic. Oh, she had language and she had laughter. Not just repeats, but originals. That's the thing about nymphs. They're not fragile. They're not delicate, they're old as rivers and just as persistent. Neko was and still is a survivor. You watch her a while longer, the others fade, the light dims, but she remains seated now alone, speaking aloud to the forest. Oh, you listen, she's telling it a story. You can't hear the words, not exactly, but you understand the rhythm, the tone, the rising lilt of question, the slow drop of sadness. She is composing a tale meant for no one and everyone. She is echoing herself. And it's beautiful. Well, you close your eyes. When you open them, the vision is gone, but something lingers. Well, not a memory, not a voice, a presence. Oh, she's nearby. You don't call out, you don't need to. You just whisper, thank you. And faintly, sweetly, the forest replies. Thank you. Major historical fact. In some ancient sources, particularly the later Roman ones, Echo was described not merely as a nymph, but as a muse-like figure, believed to inspire poets, especially those who wrote about longing, silence, or nature. Weird cultural tidbit. There was a temple near Corinth known for its whispering walls, where the acoustics allowed someone to whisper at one end and be heard clearly across the room. Locals believed Echo herself lived in the stone. A scholarly uncertainty. Some folklorists believe Echo's story may have roots in even older oral traditions from pre-Hellenic cultures, where voice spirits served as natural guardians of sacred places. So you will walk against, not away from the moment, but into it. The trees lean in closer now, their branches arching above like cathedral vaults. Moss grows thick underfoot, pillowy and silent. It absorbs your footsteps, your worries, even your name. The forest knows you now. You are no longer a visitor here. You are part of the quiet. Up ahead, something glows. It's not brightly, just enough to guide. Like candlelight remembered from a dream, you follow it and soon you arrive at another clearing. This one smaller, more hidden. Its edges curve like a bowl, cupping everything gently. In the center stands a stone statue. It is cracked. It is weather-worn. It is unmistakably her. Zeko, arms outstretched, not begging, not pleading, but opening, as if to say, hear all of this. The silence, the waiting, the listening, it is mine, and I am still here. Around the base of the statue, offerings. Not gold, not incense, but objects that feel real. A single bronze mirror face down. A flute with no mouthpiece. A faded scroll with the ink washed away. A ribbon, a smooth river stone with a thumbprint pressed into it. These are gifts not of worship, but of kinship. You kneel beside them and add something of your own. Maybe a word, maybe a thought. Maybe just the steady rhythm of your breath, which the forest accepts like a gift. Well, then you sit again. Time slows. You remember how it felt to be misunderstood. You remember how it felt to echo someone else's desires and forget your own. You remember how often silence wasn't peace, it was permission. But here in this place, silence is peace. Echo never got a shrine like Narcissus. No flower bearing her name, no fountain etched with her face. But maybe she never needed one. It's because echo is in every place where voices drift, in every word repeated, in every thought that returns to you late at night when everything else has gone quiet. An echo is memory softened, longing softened, love softened. And she is not gone. Oh, she never was. Major historical fact. In the Renaissance, echo was often invoked in poetry as a metaphor for tragic memory, appearing in works by Milton and even Shakespeare, where she symbolized both presence and absence. Weird cultural tidbit. In some early French villages, children were told that echoes were the whispers of forest witches. To speak kindly to them was to receive good luck. To insult them was to bring storms. The scholarly uncertainty. Art historians still debate whether several ancient mosaic floor designs featuring looping patterns and open mouths were intended to depict echo or generic wind deities. Interpretation varies widely. Well, this statue doesn't move. Well, it doesn't need to. The echo is not in the stone, she's around it. In the pause between the crickets. In the hush that falls when you realize you've stopped thinking in full sentences. The moonlight touches her outstretched hands, and the moss has grown up her legs like a slow memory. You imagine people must stumbled upon this clearing before wanderers, lovers, poets too in love with metaphors. Maybe they left offerings not to a goddess but to a feeling. You stay there for a while, unmoving. A leaf lands on your shoulder. A beetle walks across your foot like you're part of the scenery now. And somewhere inside that stillness, a question bubbles up. Not loud, not demanding, just present. Who are you when no one is speaking to you? Who are you when you're not responding? When you're not echoing? When the room is empty and no one's watching and there's no one else's voice to reflect? It's a hard question. But echo had to live it. Is after the curse, after Narcissus, after the myths ended and the storytellers moved on to more dramatic heroes and messier gods, echo remained, alone, listening, echoing. Or maybe healing. Because that's what time does to pain that has no one to perform for. It softens it, transforms it, not into joy always, but into something more usable, something quieter. You rise, knees stiff from sitting so long. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, but because the forest asks you to. The path ahead isn't marked, but it feels familiar. You follow it through a corridor of willows, their long arms brushing your cheeks like tired mothers. Water trickles somewhere, this time not a pool but a spring, bubbling quietly beneath a veil of moss. You kneel beside it and cup some water in your hands. It tastes like time. A cold metallic with a hint of something floral you can't quite name. Maybe time, maybe myths. And for a moment, you swear you hear laughter again. Not from the forest, from within you. Your own, unrepeated, your own first sound. You smile, and the forest repeats it back, not as an echo, but as an answer. Major historical fact: springs were sacred sites in ancient Greece, often believed to be inhabited by nymphs. Echo's association with hidden waters links her myth to dozens of real-world locations once thought to contain voices of the divine. Weird cultural tidbit: in some parts of ancient Thrace, it was customary to whisper secrets into wells. The belief was that the echo within would keep the secret safe, or carry it gently to the gods if needed. The scholarly uncertainty: echo is sometimes grouped with Oread's mountain nymphs, other times with Naiad's spirits. Scholars still debate whether she belonged to earth, water, or air, perhaps intentionally all three. The spring runs beside you now, quietly accompanying your steps like a polite friend who doesn't need to fill the silence. The moon is lower in the sky. Dawn is still far away, but it's thinking about arriving. The shadows are no longer heavy, just long. You find yourself in a grove of olive trees, their trunks thick and twisted, their silver-green leaves whispering like pages turning in a forgotten book. The ground here is soft, strewn with petals from something not currently in bloom. A mystery flower, maybe, the kind that only appears in dreams. You take a seat between two trees that lean toward each other like old friends sharing secrets. You rest your back against one and close your eyes again, not to sleep, though you could, but just to be still. You've been moving through someone else's myth. Now it's beginning to feel like yours. You remember the first time you shouted into a canyon, or maybe it was a tunnel, or a stairwell at school when you were 7. You yelled your name and the world gave it back. It was thrilling. Magic, proof that you existed. And now you think about echo, how every time someone did that, every time they laughed at the sound coming back, they were laughing with her, not at her. Because echo, in all her repetition, was never mocking. She was joining, she was answering, she was saying, "I hear you." And maybe that's what we all want. Not applause, not correction, just a simple sign that someone heard what we said, that we weren't speaking into a void, that we were real, present, echoed. Well, the wind shifts, and for the first time you hear her clearly, not just in fragments, not just in your own voice sent back. Oh, she says, "You never needed to be louder, just listened to." And then she's quiet again. But it's a different kind of quiet. Not the kind that follows silence. The kind that holds it. You feel tears prick the corners of your eyes, not sad, just warm, like your body is making room for something old and gentle and real. You sit there longer than you planned. You fall asleep briefly with your head against the olive tree. And in that nap, short, soft, safe, you dream of a world where no one speaks first or second. They just speak and listen and echo, not in repetition but in response. Major historical fact: the olive tree has been a symbol of peace, wisdom, and feminine divinity in Greek mythology, often associated with Athena, but also revered by rural cults who saw it as a dwelling place for nymphs and ancestral voices. Weird cultural tidbit: in parts of southern Italy, children were taught to ask questions of the wind near olive groves. If they heard a rustle in reply, it was said to be the spirit of echo giving advice without words. The scholarly uncertainty: the exact origins of Echo's myth are tangled with pre-Olympian oral traditions. Some scholars argue she may have been a local deity downgraded to a nymph as Greek mythology evolved into a patriarchal system. The sun still hasn't risen, but you can feel its anticipation. A faint warmth creeps along the edge of the world, brushing the treetops like an artist adding a first soft line to a painting that's mostly still blank. The sky is no longer black. It's ink blue and bleeding gently into softer shades. But down here among the olive trees, it's still night. You're still held. You stretch not out of discomfort, but from instinct. Your body is waking even as your mind drifts further into myth, a paradox, a piece. You remember that lyre from earlier, the one left behind in the ruined shrine. You wonder if Echo ever played it or if someone once played it for her. You wonder what it sounded like echoed across the forest, caught in the spaces between stone and water and air. Well, you decide to hum something. It's not a song you know, not really. Just a few drifting notes rising and falling like breath. And then you hear it. Not as an echo, not repeated, but answered. As a harmony. Distant, soft, careful. As it could be the wind. But it isn't. It's her. Not your voice, not anymore. Hers. Echo has stopped reflecting. Now she is replying, offering her own note, her own shape, her own rhythm. For the first time in a long, long while, she is not a copy. She is a participant. Well, you keep humming, she keeps answering. And there, in the silence between your two songs, you feel something shift. Like a scale finally tipping back into balance. Like a myth unraveling not in tragedy, but in release. You remember the old versions of her tale, the ones that end in fading, in loss, in absence. But here, this version, you see her reassembling, not bodily, spiritually, sound by sound. A girl piecing herself back together not by reflection, but by resonance. And you realize something. She was never meant to disappear. She was meant to endure. To wait for a listener who didn't just want to be heard, but who came to hear. And maybe that listener is you. You sit with that a while. And it sits with you. Major historical fact. Echo's name comes from the ancient Greek, rooted in the verb meaning to resound. Her very name is a verb, an action, a presence, not a passive figure, but an ongoing process. Weird cultural tidbit. In medieval bestiaries, Echo was occasionally described as a forest creature who ate sound and slept in cliffs. Some travelers left coins or bread at the base of echoing canyons as offerings to keep their voices safe. The scholarly uncertainty. There's disagreement over whether Echo's earliest appearances were meant to be tragic or instructional. Some scholars suggest she was originally a cautionary tale for interrupting conversations in public forums. You walk now through a path that feels more like memory than landscape. The air here smells of cedar and sleep. The trees lean further apart. The sky opens slowly above, painted now in muted gray-blue, like the world is just remembering how to be day again. But dawn hasn't arrived, not yet. It lingers just outside the story, respectful of the myth's pace. You step into a new clearing, and this one feels final. Not in an ending sense, but in a centered one. This is a place where things come to rest, where ideas land and stay. The kind of place that, if you visited in daylight, might just look like a meadow. But here, in this sliver of night, it feels like the heart of something very old. In the middle stands a small stone seat, polished smooth by time and perhaps by sitting. Around it, the flowers have grown wild, not planted, just present. Narcissus blooms among them, soft yellow, faces turned downward like even the flowers are in reverence here. I'll use a said. Not because you're tired, but because stillness feels sacred now. As echo is near, you don't hear her, you feel her. The way you feel your own breath when you're trying to be silent. The way you feel presence without needing proof. And then, from somewhere unseen, a voice. Not loud, not distant, not yours. Oh, it says simply, as I remember. Oh, and that's when it happens. Not a flash, not a miracle, just a quiet unfolding. Oh, you see her. Oh, echo, not ghost. Not girls, not a statue, not a concept, but a presence woven from shadow and sound and survival. She stands across the clearing, not looking at you but beside you, as though she too is seated here sharing the moment. I remember, she says again, and you understand. She's not talking about Narcissus. She's not talking about Hera or curses or the lost voice she once carried. She's talking about herself. Her names, her shape, her story reclaimed. For the first time, Echo is no longer a figure in someone else's narrative. She is the narrator. She is the voice. She is the origin. You sit quietly honoring that. And then you whisper one thing. Not a question, not a statement. Just one word carried gently on your breath. Still. And she replies, not echoed, but true. Still. You close your eyes. And that's the moment when everything finally quiets. The myths, the night, even your own mind. Major historical fact. While Narcissus is often studied as a psychological archetype, Echo has more recently been embraced in literary theory as a symbol of agency through listening, a kind of quiet resistance to domination by voice. Weird cultural tidbit. In some parts of ancient Greece, storytellers would pause when speaking Echo's name, believing that to rush it would invite her wrath or her sadness. Saying her name was a form of reverence. A scholarly uncertainty. A minority of scholars propose that Echo's myth was originally linked to the mysteries, where silence and repetition were essential parts of the sacred rites. But textual evidence remains scarce. You stay seated in the clearing, breathing slowly. The hush around you doesn't feel like absence. It feels like presence. Everything here matters, even if nothing needs to be said. You open your eyes. The world hasn't changed. But somehow you have. You rise from the stone seat, not with haste, not with a destination, but like someone stretching between chapters. The clearing remains behind you, still whole, still sacred, like a page you've read and folded gently at the corner. You walk. The forest narrows again, but only slightly. The trees now are younger, thinner, with bark that peels in ribbons and sap that smells faintly of citrus and salt. The ground is dappled in light, the kind of light that doesn't illuminate so much as invite, pale and soft like dawn painted in whispers. Ahead there's a sound, a voice, but not echo. It's a man's voice curling lazily through the trees. Familiar, confident, distant but performative, like someone posing in a mirror that talks back. You step quietly and peek around a copse of thin pines. There he is. No, Narcissus still nailing at his pool. Or maybe not him exactly, maybe just the memory of him, the idea, the loop that never closed. He looks a little more worn now, less pristine. His robe is torn at the hem, his hair isn't as carefully arranged. His eyes, still fixated on the water, look tired. Not broken, but weary in the way only endlessness can make you. Oh, he speaks softly to his reflection. Oh, you're still here, he says, you never leave. His reflection says nothing, but it seems to agree. Well, you don't interrupt. Because now at last you understand what he truly is. Not a man obsessed with himself, but a soul so desperate to be seen clearly, he chose a reflection that wouldn't interrupt him. But what he needed wasn't silence. It was response. Something Echo offered, flawed and fragmented, but real. And now, as you watch, Echo returns again. You don't see her arrive. You feel her. Not behind you, not beside you. Within the moment. She doesn't speak. She just listens. Again. And you realize this is how she forgives. Not with words, not with closure, but with presence. The kind that stays long after the moment ends. The pool ripples, a breeze brushes the surface. Narcissus blinks. Just once. Maybe he saw her. Maybe not. But either way, she remains. She no longer needs to chase him. She no longer needs to be heard by him. She is here because she chooses to be. And that is enough. Major historical fact. In Roman versions of the myth, Narcissus was often portrayed as a tragic warning against self-obsession. But some earlier versions suggest his reflection was a punishment for rejecting all love, not just Echo, but everyone. Weird cultural tidbit. In certain ancient Greek cemeteries, mirrors were buried with the dead, not for vanity, but for the soul to recognize itself in the afterlife, reflecting a fear that to forget one's image was to lose one's identity. The scholarly uncertainty. There's some debate about whether Narcissus actually saw his own reflection, or whether the pool showed him an illusion crafted by Nemesis or another deity. The myth blurs perception intentionally. Now you leave the pool behind. Not out of boredom, not out of pity. Just because it's time. Echo doesn't follow. And neither do you. Some moments are meant to end gently, to dissolve into dusk, to remain behind, folded into the leaves and water like forgotten prayers. You walk, and slowly the forest begins to rise. You're climbing now, not steeply, just enough to feel the change in your breath. The air grows cooler, thinner. Your steps leave soft impressions in dry moss and pebbles skitter gently down the path behind you. Every few feet, a flower blooms unexpectedly at the base of a tree, as if the myth is still planting its last thoughts before sunrise. Eventually, you reach the top of the ridge. And there, waiting for you, is a wide stretch of open air. You step out from the trees. Before you, the horizons. Behind you, the forest. Above, the sky is fading from night into that odd, tender palette of almost morning. Rose gold, quiet violet, the first tease of blue. You sit on a rock. Not the sacred kind, just a good rock. And you let your eyes wander. No myth up here, no drama, just breath and earth and sky. You think about Echo not as the nymph, but as the idea, the truth at the center of all repeated things, the beauty that survives in second chances. You wonder how many echoes have shaped your life. Not just literal ones, but people who mirrored your moods, who repeated your words because they didn't know how to say their own. People you've repeated too because their voices felt safer than silence. And you wonder, how many times have you mistaken reflection for relationship? How many times have you asked for an echo when what you needed was a voice? These thoughts drift like clouds across your chest, not heavy, just slow. Below the ridge, you see the first crack of sunlight spill into the forest. The trees seem to stretch slightly as if waking. And then, just as the sun begins to rise, you hear hers. An echo, just once. Not your name, not your words. Just a soft hum. Original. A whole. Entirely hers. You don't repeat it. You just let it be. And in that moment, she is no longer a myth. She is your companion. Your mirrors that didn't mimic. Your silence that listened. Your echo that finally became a voice. Major historical fact. The story of Echo and Narcissus was retold countless times during the Romantic era, often reinterpreted as a metaphor for creative longing, the desire of the poet or artist to see themselves in their work and be seen in return. Weird cultural tidbit. In some parts of the Scottish Highlands, echoes were called the hill's answers. Shepherds would whisper wishes to them at dusk, believing the land would carry their dreams into the night. The scholarly uncertainty. Modern scholars have suggested that echo represents not just sound, but memory, her curse acting as an allegory for trauma loops, where a person's responses are trapped in reaction until reclaimed. You stay on the ridge a while, letting the air pass over you. Not wind, just breath. The world exhaling after holding itself still all night. You can see everything from here. Not in sharp detail, this isn't the kind of view that demands your awe. It's the kind that simply includes you. The kind that makes you smaller in the best way. Like a period at the end of a very old sentence. Below you, the forest still carries the shapes of the story. The shrine, the pool, the grove. The stones where Echo sat, where you sat, where neither of you needed to say anything. But from this height, it all feels different. Less like a place you walked through. More like something that walked through you. Because that's the truth about myths, isn't it? They don't just live in books or temples or crumbling ruins. They live in you, in the patterns you repeat, in the feelings that echo, in the silences you fill with meaning because no one else knows how. You close your eyes. You let your spine curve slightly against the stone. Your hands rest in your lap, palms open. You don't think about what comes next. You don't make a plan, you just sit. Like a listener at the end of a very long performance, letting the final note ring. And then, somewhere behind you, footsteps. Soft ones lighter than yours. You turn slowly without alarm. And there she is. An echo. But this time, she's not standing in the trees. She's beside you. Visible, present, not glowing, not transparent, just real. Her dress is the same forest shade you've been walking through. Her eyes are tired but not sad. Her hair hangs loose, flecked with leaves she hasn't bothered to brush out. She looks like someone who's been quiet for a very long time and finally feels no pressure to explain herself. Well, you nod to her. Well, she nods back. And then you both look forward again. No words pass between you. Because there's nothing left to explain, nothing left to repeat. Just two people sitting with a story that no longer needs telling. You feel the sun finally touch your shoulder. And you hear her hum. Not an echo, or just a sound of hers, or verse. Major historical fact. In some lesser-known versions of the myth, Echo was not only restored but transformed, granted a kind of soft immortality, becoming the whisper that lingers in sacred places long after the gods stop listening. Weird cultural tidbit. Certain early Christian mystics believed echoes were the voice of Earth itself mourning Eden, a sound not born of physics but of regret. The scholarly uncertainty. Scholars continue to debate whether Echo's narrative arc was intended to parallel that of the Sibyl, another female figure cursed to persist endlessly without agency. Some believe the myths were commentary on each other. The two of you remain on the ridge as dawn slowly arrives. Not in a rush, this isn't a sunrise that bursts over the horizon like a cymbal crash. It's a steady blooming, a candle taking its time to light the room. As Echo doesn't move, neither do you. Well, the silence between you is comfortable now. It has changed. Where once it felt like suppression, now it feels like choice. And isn't that the difference? You think of all the times you've stayed silent because you thought you had to, because someone else was louder, more certain, because there was no room. But Echo, she shows you the silence that belongs to you, the one you choose, the one that listens but doesn't disappear. The silence that says, I hear, I stay, I don't vanish just because I don't speak. She turns to you then. Just slightly. And you feel her looking, not through you, not at your surface, but at the quiet inside you. The part you've carried this whole time. The part that knows how to echo but is learning how to originate. Do you hear it? She says. Her voice is soft. It vibrates like wind across harp strings. You nod. You don't know what exactly you're hearing, but you hear it. A deeper hum, a rhythm in the trees, a sigh in the grass, a name you forgot you once spoken in a dream. An echo smiles. It's small but real. And then she says one last thing. I'll then say something. And you do. Not loudly, not perfectly, but originally. A sentence you've never said before, not poetic, not rehearsed, just yours. It hangs in the air for a moment. Then Echo repeats it once. Not mocking, not hollow, just returning it to you. Gently, like a gift wrapped in your own papers. And that's when you know she's not a curse. She's a mirror for what you dare to begin. A kind of promise, if you say something real, it will not be lost. And now you are ready to walk again. Not because the story is ending, but because now you are part of it. Not an echo, a voice, Major historical fact: Roman author included a version of Echo's story in his, but instead of focusing on her punishment, he ended her tale with her presence remaining as a guide to lost travelers, echoing their cries until help arrived. Weird cultural tidbit: in ancient Delphi, where the oracle spoke in riddles, some claimed that the whispering echoes in the chamber were actual nymphs, interpreting not just sound but intention. They were seen as sacred interpreters of human feeling. The scholarly uncertainty: Echo's legacy in literature blurs the line between human and elemental. Some scholars argue she was never a person at all, but a personification of how the natural world responds when we dare to speak to it. You rise from the ridge just as the sun clears the horizon. It doesn't shout, it whispers light across the treetops. Each ray dips softly into the forest like a painter's brush dipped in honey. The branches glitter with dew, the stones warm in place. The path ahead does not beckon, it allows. As Echo walks beside you now, not behind it, though not fading. She matches your pace, not hurried, not hesitant, just present, each footfall light, each moment held without commentary. You don't need to speak, but if you do, she'll hear, she always does. As you descend back into the woods, something curious happens. The forest begins to shift, not in shape but in tone. The trees you passed earlier have changed, not physically, not dramatically, but now they feel different. Is that old shrine where the lyre rested? The moss has grown thicker around its base, curling up like velvet. The air around it seems to hum a single low chord. The broken stone bench by the spring, it glows faintly with the memory of stillness. You can almost hear your own breathing from when you sat there earlier. And the place where Narcissus knelt, the pool has grown still again. Clear, peaceful, no longer a mirror for obsession, just water, just truth. You realize that you're not revisiting these places. They are revisiting you. As if the forest remembers. Not just Echo. You. It's every word you whispered into its silence. Every thought you had when no one else was listening. Every pause. And somehow, in this mythic stillness, you feel seen. Not watched. Not judged. Just known. You pause at a tree with bark marked in concentric scars, like time recorded in its own language. You press your hand against it, and again you hear it. The hums. The low, soft, endless. It is echo. It's everything. The wind. The root systems. The sun in the leaves. The sound of what is left after all words have rested. You close your eyes, not to shut out the world, but to let it in more fully. And beside you, Echo does the same. Not because she's repeating you, but because this moment belongs to both of you now. Major historical fact: the ancient Greek concept of mimesis, art as imitation, was closely tied to myths like Echoes. But in later philosophy, especially in Neoplatonism, Echo was reinterpreted not as mere repetition but as divine reflection, the world mirroring its own soul. Weird cultural tidbit: in the sacred groves of priests listened to the rustling of oak leaves and interpreted them as the voice of the goddess. Some claimed that Echo herself helped carry these whispers to human ears. The scholarly uncertainty: Echo is often categorized as a minor character in myth, but feminist mythologists argue that her enduring presence, across languages, landscapes, and centuries, makes her one of the most culturally resonant figures of all. You and Echo reach a stream now, not a dramatic river, just a soft, curling trickle of water making its way over stones like it's in no particular hurry to arrive anywhere. The kind of stream that seems to babble without purpose but somehow says exactly what it means. You both kneel beside it. While you drink. The water is cool but not cold, clear, alive, and as it touches your lips you think not for the first time about voice. Not just speech, but voice. The thing that lives beneath words. The thing you lose when you agree too much, when you shrink, when you let everyone else finish your sentences because it's easier than finding your own. You sit back on your heels and look at Echo. She's watching the water. You wonder what she sees. Maybe her own face, maybe yours, maybe nothing. Maybe she's stopped looking for reflections altogether. Maybe she's just watching the way water moves, not to understand it, but to honor it. That's what she does now. She honors, not by repeating, by being with. And then she speaks. Her voice is no louder than before, but it's clearer. You know, she says, there's a kind of power in not rushing to reply. You look at her. She doesn't elaborate. She doesn't need to. You think about all the conversations you've had where your mind was already preparing a response before the other person had finished their sentence. All the noise we create to avoid the discomfort of simply being there. Echo has learned to love that space. The space where nothing is said. And somehow everything is felt. The stream keeps moving. You let your fingers trail through it. Echo lies back on the grass now, arms folded behind her head, gazing at the leaves above. You follow her lead. And there you both are. On the ground, under the sky, no longer cursed, no longer searching, just existing. The two voices who finally learned that silence isn't the enemy. It's the invitation. And sometimes the most generous thing you can do is not echo someone. Just witness them. You glance at her one last time before your eyes close again. She smiles, not because you're watching, but because she wants to. Major historical fact. In some late Hellenistic texts, Echo is portrayed not just as a nymph, but as a philosophical figure, an embodiment of inner reflection. Her curse is interpreted as a metaphor for self-dialogue, how we talk to ourselves using borrowed words before finding our own. Weird cultural tidbit. In parts of ancient Mesopotamia, temple scribes practiced silent recitation, repeating sacred texts inwardly without sound. These inner echoes were believed to be more powerful than spoken ones because the gods listened directly to the heart. A scholarly uncertainty. There are competing views on whether Echo's voice was truly taken or merely redirected. Some translations suggest her loss of speech was really a redirection of agency, from initiation to response, raising questions about what true silence means. You don't know how long you've been lying in the grass beside Echo. The time, like everything else here, has softened. Maybe it's minutes, maybe lifetimes. You open your eyes slowly. Above you, the trees sway not in panic, not in urgency, but in rhythm. The breeze moves through their leaves like a voice moving through a choir, gentle, layered, unseen but unmistakable. The echo hasn't spoken again, but she hasn't left either. She is here entirely in her silence. And that's what's different now. Her presence doesn't feel fragile anymore. She's not balancing on the edge of vanishing. She's solid, quiet, yes, but rooted. Her silence isn't the kind that comes from being erased. It's the kind that comes from choosing peace over noise. You sit up slowly, brushing a few petals from your shoulder. Its echo stays on the ground, arms folded behind her head, eyes half closed in a kind of waking dream. She hums softly to herself, not for you, not as a repetition, just because the morning has given her space to sing. You stand and begin to walk again. But this time, echo doesn't follow. You look back. She raises a hand, not a wave goodbye, just a gesture of presence, a reassurance. You're allowed to go on without her. Because now she knows something too, she isn't trapped anymore. She doesn't need to chase. She doesn't need to cling. She echoes what she chooses. She stays when she wants. You nod a silent promise. And then you leave the grove. You walk through the trees with new footing. Not lighter, not heavier, just aware of your sound, your movement, yourself. There is no path anymore. But somehow you don't need one. You pass through a thicket of tall grass where insects rise like gentle applause. A small rabbit watches you from a rock, then hops away as if to announce your arrival to the next clearing. And then you find it. A field. Wide open, golden. The kind of field you might expect in the middle of a painting. The kind of place that makes you pause not for awe but for stillness. It asks nothing from you. It simply says this is where you are now. You lie down in the center, and you let the story catch up to you. Major historical fact. In late antiquity, echo was used in allegorical texts to represent the anima or soul. The voice within that repeats not the world's noise but its truths. Monks and mystics wrote prayers as conversations with echo. Weird cultural tidbit. In parts of 18th century rural Europe, children were taught to listen for the echo during their first prayer. If the hills answered them, it was said their soul had been heard by heaven. The scholarly uncertainty. Some researchers argue that echo's presence in mythology was meant to represent divine timing, that repeating someone's words wasn't just mimicry but reverence, a holy act of listening until the words took root. The field is full of wind. Not gusts, not storms, just movement. It plays in the tall grasses like fingers on harp strings. It rushes over your skin without pushing. It carries the scent of dry earth dew and something you can only describe as memory. You lie on your back and stare at the sky. It's high and pale now, daylight in its earliest form. The kind of light that doesn't reveal so much as soften. The clouds drift like long thoughts you forgot to finish. And in this moment, you are not a visitor in this story. You are a character. Not the hero, not the tragedy. Just a person inside something older than themselves. And that, you realize, is the gift of echo. Not to be heard. Not even to be repeated. But to be inside. To belong to a sound so fully that even when it fades, You feel the shape it left in you. You sit up and close your eyes again. This time on purpose. And you say something. Not loud. Not brave. Not even coherent. Just something true. And the wind, kind as ever, gathers it. And returns something softer. Not a perfect reflection, but an acknowledgement. A hand on the shoulder in sound form. You don't know if it's echo. You don't know if it's the wind. You don't know if it's just the air moving around your mouth. But it feels sacred anyway. You press your palms into the earth. It's dry but full of life. You feel the tiny vibrations of insects moving below the surface. You feel the sun reaching your skin without urgency. You feel, for the first time in a long time, that your presence here doesn't need explanation. And that's when you hear it again. The laugh, a familiar, the small, now yours, but different, not echoed, returned. It's like someone handing your words back, not as a mirror, but as a friend. You breathe, you stay, you listen. The field answers in rustles, in quiet, in light, and that's enough. Major historical fact. Philosophers like Plotinus and later mystic thinkers referenced echo as an example of divine interaction, suggesting that echo was how the soul heard back from the cosmos when it spoke its own truths aloud. Weird cultural tidbit. In Tibetan sky burials, it's believed that mountains respond to the names of the dead, carrying their final echo up to the gods. Villagers sometimes whisper a loved one's name into a valley and wait for it to return. The scholarly uncertainty. There's an ongoing debate about whether Echo's silence was meant to be tragic or transcendent. Some believe she represents what it means to listen without agenda. Others say she's a cautionary tale about the cost of voiceless love. Now the field is still with you. Even as you stand and continue walking, a part of it lingers, not in your footsteps, but in your breathing. You carry it the way a breeze carries scent, invisibly but unmistakably. The path ahead isn't marked, but it's generous. And by now, you've learned that not every path needs signs. Some just need attention. Some are made by being walked. You move through a soft grove of cypress trees now. They stand tall and lean slightly, like old men who stopped trying to stand straight and instead have mastered the art of graceful surrender. Their shadows ripple in quiet shapes over the ground, like stories told in gestures instead of words. You pass a tree with a long scar along its bark. A lightning strike maybe, or time, or memory. You reach out and place your hand against it, not to heal it, just to acknowledge it. Well, sometimes that's enough. And then, like turning a page, you step into a new space. Around hills, low, covered in time and stone. Is in the center a circle of flat rocks, arranged without perfection. Placed here maybe centuries ago, maybe last week. There's no plaque, no offering, no god watching from behind a curtain of ivy. But it feels sacred anyway. I'll use it again. And you listen. Not for echo. Not even for yourself. You listen for the thing that exists beneath listening. Stillness is the kind that isn't empty. Well, the kind that contains. The kind that remembers everything you've ever whispered, not because it was important, but because it was yours. And in that stillness, you feel her again. Not approaching, not arriving, just already here. She sits beside you. You don't need to look. You just know. And then she speaks. Not a mythic declaration, not a prophecy, just a small truth. It was never about who spoke first. You nod. She continues. It's about who stayed long enough to hear what came after. You close your eyes and let the words settle. They don't echo. They root. And in the warm hush of that hilltop, you realize you've spent much of your life trying to be heard, when maybe, just maybe, what you were really looking for was someone who wouldn't leave when the speaking stopped. Echo didn't. Not because she was cursed, because she understood the sacredness of staying. Major historical fact. In certain mystery cults of ancient Greece, initiates were taught to speak into the earth and then remain silent, believing the land would respond through symbols, weather, or dreams. Echo was invoked in these rituals as a listening spirit. Weird cultural tidbit. Among the Gauls, it was believed that the rocks in certain groves held sound. Warriors would speak to the stones before battle, asking them to remember their bravery, and the stones would answer only in dreams. The scholarly uncertainty. Echo is sometimes linked to early lunar goddesses, not by name but by role, as a listener, a witness, and a keeper of cycles. Some believe her story was a stripped-down fragment of a once larger myth about the moon's silence. You remain on the hill long enough for the sun to move a full hand's breadth across the sky. Light dapples over the grass in shifting, careless elegance. Birds flit overhead, not the loud kind, just the ones that sing in short, thoughtful notes. You think maybe they're just tuning the morning. An echo is still beside you. Well, neither of you speak. Not out of awkwardness, but because some companionships don't need constant proof. Some presences speak clearest by not competing with the moment. You stretch out your legs, you feel the warmth of the stones beneath your palms. You let the silence say everything. And then you ask a question. Not loudly, and not expecting an answer. Just releasing it into the space between you. Or do you miss it? A little pause. Then quietly. Or sometimes. Or you nod. As Echo elaborates but barely. Or not him. Or the possibility. Or you understand. Or she doesn't miss Narcissus. She misses the hope that someone might hear her and not be afraid of her echo. You think of all the times you offered a piece of yourself and were met with silence. Or worse, rejection. You think of how long you carried those silences, how you folded them into yourself, how you built homes out of echoes because no one else was building bridges. And then you look at Echo, and she's smiling. Not wistfully, not sadly, but with peace. Because she's found something more enduring than being heard. She's found a place where she can speak without fear, without judgment, without being erased by someone else's voice. And here in this myth, she is not fatting. She is resting. You close your eyes again. not to sleep, but to receive the warmth, the wind, or the sound of a presence beside you that expects nothing. An echo hums softly. It's not a song. It's a presence in sound form. And it doesn't ask you to repeat it. It just asks you to be. You lie back again on the grass. You exhale. And for the first time, the silence around you doesn't feel like a void. It feels like a reply. Major historical fact. In post-classical literature, echo became a symbol not just of repetition, but of endurance. Writers in the 17th and 18th centuries referenced her as the last word of the world, a poetic embodiment of persistence in the absence of applause. Weird cultural tidbit. In some Buddhist monastic traditions, the sound of a bell echoing through the mountains was believed to awaken forgotten thoughts in the listener's subconscious. Echoes were seen as spiritual nudges, gentle reminders of truth. The scholarly uncertainty. Some philologists believe the evolution of the word echo through different languages, Greek, Latin, Old French, has shaped our understanding of the myth more than the myth shaped the word. A case of the echo becoming louder than the origin. You stay on the hill until the breeze starts to rise again. Not urgent, just suggestive. It's a gentle hand on your back, encouraging you forward, the way a friend might open a door not because you need to leave, but because the room has given you all it could. You rise slowly. Its echo remains seated in the grass. She picks at a blade absently, her fingers moving in that idle, thoughtful rhythm of someone who's deeply present. You catch her eye. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. You know this is where your paths part, not in grief, not in goodbye, just in rhythm. She's the voice of this forest. You are always passing through. You bow your head slightly. Not a dramatic gesture. Just reverence. For her. For what she held. For how she strayed. She doesn't echo your movement. She simply returns it with stillness, her own kind of bow. And then you walk. Down the hill. As out of the clearing. Into the dappled woods again. You follow no path, but somehow the forest guides you. The light grows thicker now, golden and warm, filtered through the canopy in shifting veils. Your footsteps make soft noises against the moss, like the earth is murmuring to itself. You notice how everything feels quieter now. Not empty. Just answered. You remember the early parts of your journey, how the forest felt foreign then, mysterious, haunted by a sadness you couldn't name. Now it feels familiar. Now it feels yours. Not because you own it, but because you listened to it. And it listened back. You pass another clearing. This one small, unremarkable, just a flat stone surrounded by clover. A spot that would gone unnoticed before, but now you pause. You sit again. You whisper something small into the air. And you wait. No echo. No reply. Just a silence so gentle it cradles your words. And that's when you understand. The real myth wasn't about a girl who lost her voice. It was about what happens when the world gives it back. Slowly, in the stillness, with care.
You press your hand against the earth, not asking anything, just saying thank you. And somewhere faintly the wind answers, not with your voice, with hers. You're welcome.
Major historical fact. In the final lines of Metamorphoses, Ovid writes that Narcissus fades into memory, but Echo continues, her voice echoing through time, never tethered to a place. This subtle line recenters her as the enduring force in the myth. Weird cultural tidbit. In a few remote Himalayan villages, echoes were believed to be left by travelers long gone, resonances of those who loved the land enough to leave part of themselves behind. The scholarly uncertainty. Echo's lasting influence is hard to trace because she was never the center of any temple, festival, or formal worship. And yet her presence appears in art, architecture, poetry, and language across too. Some scholars say that's what makes her sacred.
You walk against, but now it feels different.
You are no longer walking through a story.
You are walking with it.
The trees begin to thin and the light shifts from dappled to direct. You're nearing the edge of the forest. You can feel it not as an end but as a horizon.
The air smells different here.
Less of moss, more of sun-warmed stone and open fields.
You step through the final line of trees. And there it is. The world. The one you left behind when this story began. But it's changed. Or rather, you have. The sky seems wider. The wind feels like an invitation. And the silence, it still hums with her. You turn one last time to look back. The forest stands behind you, not waving, not weeping, just standing. A whole, a complete, and somewhere deep within it, Echo breathes. She's not waiting. She's not following. She's just there. Her voice no longer trapped. No longer broken. Just part of everything. You whisper something toward the trees, so faint you almost forget what it was. The word, the name, the promise, and the forest very gently answers. Not with your words, but with its own. And you understand. An echo is not the tragedy of lost voice. She is the triumph of found presence. She is the one who stayed when others faded. She is the listener who made the story matter. And now, you are her echo. Not in repetition, in memory, in quietness, in care. You turn to the world again. Step forward, and this time when you speak, the voice is entirely your own. And somewhere behind you, Echo smiles. Major historical fact. Echo's story was often excluded from epic traditions, but has quietly endured in personal ones. Oral storytellers in many cultures, especially women, recounted her tale as a symbol of loyalty, attentiveness, and emotional intelligence. Weird cultural tidbit. In Icelandic folklore, echoes were once called the listening stones. It was believed that saying your worries aloud to certain cliffs would ensure that the earth remembered them when you forgot. The scholarly uncertainty. Some myth scholars argue that Echo's story was never meant to be one story, but many fragments, quiet appearances in larger narratives.
Like an echo, her myth was never about being the loudest. It was about lasting. You're walking now not towards something, not away from anything, just walking. Each step feels like part of a rhythm older than movement. The breeze doesn't resist you. The ground doesn't ask for anything. You're no longer a traveler. You're a part of the forest's own unfolding. You pass beneath a last row of olive trees, and their shadows fall like slow, reaching arms across your path. They aren't trying to keep you, just saying goodbye the way trees do, with posture, with stillness, with the low murmur of leaves. You pause once more, resting your hand on the knotted trunk of one. The bark is warm from the morning sun. You wonder how long it stood here and how many stories have passed beside it, whispered their names, asked for shelter in its silence. You imagine Echo sitting here once, long before curses, long before repetition, just sitting, watching the wind, listening not for someone else's voice but for her own pulse in the quiet.
You smile. She would liked this morning. No one needing hers. No one talking over hers. Just breath, just presence, just the soft language of being. And now that you've walked this far, you realize something. This story was never about recovery. Not entirely. It was about recognition. Recognizing silence as an offering. Recognizing your voice as worthy, even when it doesn't bounce off a wall. Recognizing that when no one replies, it doesn't mean your words disappeared. Sometimes they simply landed. You look around, and you see it everywhere now. Echo, not as a figure in a toga, but in the curve of the wind, in the way grass bows and rises, in the way morning light lingers on the tips of your fingers when you hold them to the sun. She's not a myth anymore. She's a condition of the world. She is what happens when presence meets patience. When someone stays long enough to become the reply they never received. You walk a few more steps, then sit down at the edge of a small slope. Below you, the fields widen into a low, sunlit plain. No cities in sight, just land, just sky, just breath. And somewhere behind you, the softest voice says, I'm still here. Not because she has to be, but because she wants to be. And this time you answer. Major historical fact. Some modern scholars believe that Echo's enduring power lies in her lack of finality. Unlike Narcissus, who becomes a flower and is memorialized, Echo continues her form ambiguous, her presence timeless. She is the myth that doesn't end. Weird cultural tidbit. In Japan, there's a tradition called the belief that words carry spiritual power. Echoes are thought to be the lingering spirit of a word still looking for its home. The scholarly uncertainty. While Echo is commonly labeled a tragic figure, more recent interpretations argue she was never truly tragic, but transitional. She represents the moment when pain turns into something else. Memory, art, resilience. You rest by the slope for a while, watching the light stretch across the plain. It doesn't rush. It simply spreads, like honey over warm bread, like sleep across a quiet mind, like meaning across a life once filled with noise. As the breeze brushes your cheek again, you don't turn to look for her. You know she's not behind you anymore. She's within the moment. You feel her in the hush between birdsong, in the pause before your next breath, in the way you now move with the world instead of against it. And then you hear her laugh. I truly laughed. Not a repetition, not a mimicry. As a real laugh, bright, full humans. It bursts out suddenly, like a stream unblocked, like a door thrown open after centuries of quiet knocking. You laugh too. Not because it's funny, or because it's free, or because it's hers. Because now, after all this time, she finally sounds like someone who belongs to herself. You lie back in the grass, arms spread like wings. You think of all the ways voice has been taken from people, not just by gods or curses or myths, but by misunderstanding, by dismissal, by noise that drowns instead of celebrates. You think of all the voices that went quiet, not because they didn't want to speak, but because the world forgot how to listen. Zand echo. She is what's left when the shouting fades. She is the part of the story that waits. And waits. And waits until someone like you comes along, not to fix her, not to free her, but to sit beside her and say, "Oh, you can speak first." And maybe for the first time in 1,000 years, she believes it. You feel her standing nearby now, not hovering, not watching. Just a present. Just real. Like a friend you grew up with and somehow forgot. Like a version of yourself who never asked permission to exist. You whisper a thank you not to the sky, not to the gods, just to the moment. The moment that echoed. And this time, no one repeats you. No one needs to. The world simply listens. And in that listening, you are known. Major historical fact. Echo's myth is now used in therapeutic and academic fields as a metaphor for healing through active listening. She is the patron saint of not interrupting, of holding space, of making room for others to hear themselves. Weird cultural tidbit. In parts of Sardinia, it was believed that echoes came from women who had been transformed into air. Locals would speak blessings into empty valleys, believing those women would carry the words to others who needed them. The scholarly uncertainty. There's disagreement about Echo's name in pre-Greek cultures. Some argue it wasn't a name at all, but a concept, an ancient proto-word for presence that remains. In other words, not the voice itself, but the space it left behind. You stay in the grass until the sun lifts overhead. Not high, just enough to make the shadows shorter, the colors softer. The kind of light that makes even stones look forgiving. The sky is wide now, open, pale blue, brushed with thin clouds that move like someone exhaling slowly. The birds have quieted, not because they're afraid, but because they've said what needed saying. You stretch once more lazily and rise to your feet. Your limbs are loose, your thoughts unknotted. You've been in this myth so long now, you've stopped trying to exit it. You've begun to wear it like a coat, light, familiar, yours. You walk again slowly. Not through a forest this time. Through openness. Through space. The world feels larger now, but not overwhelming. Spacious, like someone finally cleared a room for you in a house that's always been too loud. You feel no need to speak. The silence is full. It doesn't need to be filled. It needs to be kept company. And still, even now, you feel her. Echo, not chasing, not echoing, not waiting. Just walking somewhere nearby, not always close, but always present. She's no longer the girl in the glade, haunted by longing. She's no longer the shadow behind the myth of Narcissus. She's become something else. A rhythm, a patience, a kind of language for people who feel more deeply than they speak. You pass a rock with a spiral carved into it. You run your fingers over it slowly. You don't know who carved it or when, it doesn't matter. Spirals always mean the same thing: return, renewal, repetition, not of pain but of learning. You think of Echo again, how the world mistook her for a curse. But maybe she was never cursed. Maybe she was just ahead of her time. A voice built for those who speak carefully, who feel fully, who know that saying something twice isn't weakness, it's reverence. And in this silence, you begin to hear other echoes. No, not hers. No, yours. Your own thoughts coming back to you in softer voices. Your own memories returning without the shame they used to wear. Your own words gently reminding you who you are when you stop performing. You sit once more, one last time. This time on a low stone ledge, beside a tree that leans as if it's listening. And you say out loud, "I understand now." And the silence that follows is the affirmation. Major historical fact. In some variations of the myth, Echo doesn't vanish but becomes a spirit guide, leading lost travelers through forests by mimicking their voices gently, guiding them back without fear. She became known not as a curse, but as a compass. Weird cultural tidbit. In early Romanian folklore, people believed if you spoke kindly into a cave or deep forest, the echo would follow you for days, protecting you from harm, ensuring your words stayed alive in the world. The scholarly uncertainty. Scholars still debate whether Echo's myth was created to explain a natural phenomenon, or if the natural phenomenon was reimagined to house her story. As with most myths, the truth is likely both, and neither. You stay seated on the ledge, watching the wind fold and unfold through the grass. It's mid-morning now, maybe late, but there's no clock here, just the sun's mood. Just the hum of insects like quiet percussion in a story that no longer needs words. Your eyes begin to close, not from exhaustion, from fullness. You lean back, not to escape, to settle. There's nothing more to find. And still, the story offers you one last thing. A voice, not from the trees, not from the air, or from within. It speaks slowly, calmly, without shape. And it says, "You are heard, not you were, not you will be. You are." And for the first time, the thought doesn't make you flinch. It doesn't make you tense or try to earn it. It simply arrives, like breath, like shadow, like wind. You open your eyes. And Echo is there again. Not beside you, not in front of you, but everywhere. In the rustle of the grasses, in the shimmer of heat rising off the stones, in the way the light touches your hands and reminds you that you exist. And you realize now she was never just a myth. She was never just a girl. She is what happens when silence becomes kind. When repetition becomes reverent. When listening becomes sacred. You sit in that understanding a while longer. And then you speak again. Not to the gods, not to yourself, just to the moment. I will carry this with me. And you know she hears. You don't wait for an echo. You just let the wind move past. Oh, and it does. Warm, assured. All present. The trees ahead grow fewer now. The land opens wider. You're almost home. But you are not leaving her behind. You're carrying her voice now. Not in your throat. In your attention. And every time you listen to someone who feels invisible, is every time you repeat something not to correct, but to honor. And every time you speak softly into silence and trust that someone hears. An echo lives, not as a sound, as a promise. And maybe, just maybe, you do too. Major historical fact. In the oldest surviving fragments of her myth, Echo is unnamed. She is only the sound after. It was the poets who gave her a name, but it was the listeners who gave her a purpose. Weird cultural tidbit. In rural Ethiopia, certain valleys are called breathing lands. People sit there in silence, claiming they can hear voices, not haunting but remembering. Echoes of prayers, laughter, names. Places where sound lingers like a guest that never left. The scholarly uncertainty. No one knows how the echo myth would ended if she had spoken first. And maybe that's the point. The myth doesn't end, it resonates, it repeats. It lives again every time we remember to listen before we answer. The road becomes more defined now. Not paved, not loud, just clear. It winds gently through golden fields, through quiet brush, through spaces that seem to widen as you walk, welcoming you not like a returning hero, but like someone who always belonged. The horizon no longer feels distant. It feels like part of your breaths. Each step forward echoes not in sound, but in feeling. Your foot falls softly and the world replies, not in repetition, but in openness. You pass a low wall made of stacked stones, moss growing through the cracks like veins in old hands. You pause, rest your palm on it, say nothing, but it hears you anyway. You're not trying to remember the journey, you're letting it remember you. The echo has stopped speaking. Not because she's gone, because she no longer needs to explain herself. She has become a constant now, not a haunting, not a lesson, a presence. And so have you. You cross a stream, not the same one from before, but related. All water is family. You crouch and place a hand into its current. You watch it move around your fingers, not pushing, just adjusting. The way Echo always did, the way you've now learned to do too. You don't ask for another sign. You don't whisper into the hills. Oh, you just stand. And that's enough. You turn toward the path that leads into the low valley below. The world waits quietly. And as you walk, you realize. Echo was never just the nymph in the myths. She was the part of every story that stayed quiet so others could speak. She was the gentle return when someone dared to reach out. And now she is the quiet in you that finally feels heard. A final wind down 300 plus words. Now you're back where the myth begins. But you're not the same. Your breath is slower now, your shoulders softer. Your thoughts quieter, not because they're gone, but because they've stopped shouting. You let your eyes close.
You feel the air around you, gentle, warm, as if the story itself is tucking you in. No need to chase any more moments. No need to fix, to repeat, to respond. Just let them drift.
As echo is nearby, not whispering, not watching, just resting the way all voices do when they're finally safe. Let yourself rest too. In the softness of knowing you don't have to explain yourself. In the kindness of a silence that doesn't ask for more. In the slow, safe rhythm of the earth remembering you. There's no more myth to walk through, no more steps to take. Let the sounds fade now. The wind in the trees. The hush of distant water. The last birds settling onto their branches. Is all of it quiet now, all of it holding you? This is the place where the story ends and the listening begins. Let yourself sink into it. Let the breath rise and fall, like tide, like memory, like peace. The story doesn't echo anymore. It rests, and so do you. Good night.